Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have breaking news today. Of course, as you know, there is the shooting, the assassination attempt on President Trump yesterday. So we'll be covering some breaking news this morning. Tom Jolly, the New York Times print editor, will be with us for just a bit at the top of the show. Our guest is Anna Pakman, a disability rights advocate. She'll be talking about Disability Pride Month and the ADA at 34 years, the American Disability with Disabilities Act, and a new movie that she produced. My name is Neil Parek. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We're also live on um, Instagram. We're going to double check that we're live on Twitter. Breaking news for in terms of social media. I got a message as we went live that we now need a premium account to go live on Twitter, which is news to me. It worked on Thursday and it didn't work now. But the big news, again, want to make sure that you know Tom Jolly, the New York Times print editor, will be joining us to talk about how the front page evolved yesterday with the breaking news. We want to welcome some of the folks who are watching. Shashi Belamkonda is watching. Thank you. Patty Freudenberg, Jonathan Borstein, and Paula Kiger are our early guests. Thank you so much for logging in. Let's go ahead and bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan. Sri, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Breaking news overnight means we've got to adjust our show a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful to Anna Pakman, who is going to be speaking with us in detail. She's our guest. She's going to join us in a few minutes, but we have so much to talk about. Yesterday, the attempted assassination attempt on former President Trump, as well as the passing of Dr. Ruth and Richard Simmons, all of that happening in one day. And we were really interested to see how the folks at the Times were dealing with this news. And we will bring on Tom Jolly in just a moment, just to show everybody this is what the fruits of the labor of the team at the New York Times, what the front page looked like. And there were some fascinating side elements to this, including Doug Mills, the photographer who was there. And there's a different photo that I've seen on television of what looks like the streak of the bullet heading towards the president that was on TV this morning. But as with everything, you have to be careful to know if this is actually things that we can verify before we share it. So I think we're ready to bring on Tom. Tom is the print editor of the New York Times, and we are very grateful to him for joining us at zero notice on a Sunday morning. He's been a guest with us before, but we're just thrilled that he could be here to talk to us.
Absolutely. Let's bring on Tom Jolly.
Good
Tom,
morning.
thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So Tom, let's make sure everyone understands. You are the print editor of the New York Times. You run the Print Hub. So please explain to us what that is and how your day evolved yesterday.
Sure. So we now have many different ways of communicating our journalism to our subscribers, obviously. And we've broken those groups into specific teams, digital, audio, video, and of course, my team is print. So we plan, design, and edit the paper and work with our printing facilities. Mike Connors at College Point, Robert Barnes, who manages our national printing operation. We have agreements with 24 printing plants around the country. So, yesterday was one of those days where we started the day with plan A, and around a little bit after 6 o'clock, I was actually either about to return or at the grocery store. Word broke that it appeared that someone had opened gunfire at the Trump rally, and we had started the. Obviously, this week is the Republican National Convention, so we had started the day with a large what we call the lead story, looking at the Republican, another story about Republican strategy and the conservative allies that are putting together plans for this the stretch of the campaign and the election. As you can see, we had the story about Hamas, why the elite in Hollywood turned their back on Biden. The other surprise, of course, was Dr. Ruth learning in the morning, I think around 9 or 9:30, that Dr. Ruth Westheimer had died. And on Saturday for Sunday, we have a noon edition. So even learning at 9:30 in the morning that there was news, it's right on deadline for that noon edition, and that's the only edition those people get. So it's just as important as every other edition. And we scrambled to get that into the paper on the front page.
So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the noon edition. And so if we go back to the top, one of the things that changed, by the way, is that Ruth in the noon edition got 2-column obit on the front page. Here she got 1 column on the later day. So basically you blew up the paper, and that's what the difference we're seeing here now. So if we look at this,
right.
You can see
so
that.
Just to be clear, we also have a 4 o'clock edition for the city. So the first edition for the city was the same as the page we were just looking at. So as you say, obviously when we got word that there'd been some sort of an incident at the Trump rally, the first challenge is finding out what exactly happened. Again, that was at a little after 6. Our next edition closes at 8 p.m. And so you're in this moment of you have to close the paper by 8 o'clock. You want to get this news in, but you got to make sure you know what it is. And unfortunately, at events like this, the idea that someone heard gunfire is not that unusual. What was obviously different here is the Secret Service immediately surrounded Trump. It quickly became apparent that he was bloody. And of course, he was rushed off the stage. So we knew in this case that there was something very significant happening, and that he'd been hurt. If you've seen the video, he was pumping his fist and waving at the crowd. So it seemed likely that it was not a life-threatening kind of situation. But for a very long time, there was not confirmation that we were comfortable enough that that it had actually been a shooting. It could have been. There are. The teleprompter glass is in front of him, and there was some suspicion that maybe somebody threw something and the glass shattered. Anyway, it took a while for us to actually feel comfortable saying it was a shooting, even though, and when you're looking at television or you're looking at social media, people are 100% convinced that this whatever it is happened. But we've learned many times in unfortunate situations like mass shootings that there's just all kinds of bad information that circulates in the really for quite a while after something like this happens. It's just confusing, and it's not that people are necessarily trying to spread bad information, but they're trying to share what they know, and a lot of times it's not right.
Sure. We have folks watching from all over. Here's Diane watching in Bend, Oregon. So it's 5:40 in the morning. Diane, thank you for joining us. Naomi's watching from the Upper West Side. Here, Makrand is a ardent ADA advocate, so that's going to be interesting for him to be with us when we talk to Anna, who's a disabilities rights activist. Walter Greason's watching. Such an important conversation. Thank you for being the best streaming news program every Sunday. Good morning from St. Paul, Minnesota. Walter Greason, former guest and great expert on various issues about America. Dr. Tachi's watching from Fort Lauderdale. And Shashi wants to tell you, Tom, that he's a New York Times subscriber. So that's important that you
Fantastic.
know that.
Yes,
You're
thank
talking to your people here. And Stefan says, good morning. Very unnerving time. Stay safe in all that comes to mind this morning. And Patty asked the question, what is the protocol? Where do you get your information first? I know you have people on the scene, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, in this case, of course, because it was a Trump rally and there was speculation that he might name his vice presidential candidate, we had a lot of people, a relatively large number of people. I don't have the exact number, but Doug Mills, our photographer, several reporters, and our political desk was monitoring the event in real time on television and through streaming. to see what news was going to happen. And of course, no one expected this, but by just the fact that this was a big moment, we were pretty well prepared. And so what happens is our reporters on the scene are trying to get information. They're first of all obviously observing what happened, and they're going to report that. They're going to write what they saw. And then all of our folks who have connections in law enforcement jump into action and start reaching out to all the people that they know in law enforcement and in politics and in the Republican Party and so forth, to try to find out as much as they can. And of course, the other side of it is that the authorities want to get the word out on any details that they can fairly quickly, so they will talk to the media, not just us, but whoever happens to be on the scene in particular. For us, though, for the newspaper, we now live in a world where we're putting a lot of things online that are bits of information and what we call our live report online. For the newspaper, we need a story, a narrative story. And so that was our next priority after we realized that this was indeed a serious shooting, likely assassination attempt. And so that became our scramble, simultaneous scramble, as we were trying to get a story that was as much detail as we could, and also totally changing the front page layout. As you saw in the early edition, there was a story about Jaws, the 50th anniversary of Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
We took that off. That was kind of a light story, and was the easiest to move in, but also felt a little off in a moment when someone had tried to shoot at the presidential candidate. So
for those joining us, this is Tom Jolly. He's the print editor of the New York Times, and we're looking at the noon or the 4 o'clock edition of the Sunday paper, noon Eastern, 4 Eastern. And because the Trump news happened at 6 p.m., they were able to get it into today's paper. So we're talking about that. Here's the Jaws story that I presume ran inside this 50 years
correct.
ago that Jaws, the book came out before the movie and everything else. Let's go back to the front page, today's front page, and see Professor Gleason says, very interesting choice to crop the flag in the cover page. So you had a lot of choices of photographs. Can you talk us through how you decided this would be the image that you used?
Sure. I don't know that we actually cropped the flag. Please remember that the photographer here is very, very close to the stage, and in this moment is, as he said in a story that will be in the paper, I think Monday. It was pretty worrisome. He's trying to do his job and capture the moment for the Times. We looked at a couple of different photos. We thought this one really captured the moment best. And I'm not sure the flag was ever in the picture more than it is right here, but it shows the Secret Service surrounding the president. I believe this is the moment when they had lifted him back up, and he's signaling to the crowd that he's okay.
And the most important thing is to see the blood on his face, because then
that's right. That's right. There were other, yeah.
There were, I think that's the moment when this became serious. I saw multiple reports that the teleprompter glass hit him, but obviously you have proof that it did not, because there's the teleprompter in unbroken teleprompter right there. So it's the bullet that came from that side that grazed him, and it's a very powerful shot. Patty says, you'll always remember when something like this happens. I found out from my 9-year-old granddaughter this moment. You were in the grocery store, you said.
It was either, I think I may have I was driving home from the grocery store. That's right. When we have a Slack messaging that we communicate with and we got a message from one of our colleagues that said it looks like Trump, there may have been a shooting or something to that effect.
Everyone, please tag a friend who will find this important, useful. They can watch now or later. This will run on all our channels: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on Digimentors.group. And look what Walter's doing. He's tagging friends so they can watch later. So please tell your friends, please share this. We're with Tom for just another couple of minutes, and then we will have our regular show, but we're going to examine the coverage very closely. Martin says, one of the problems in the news media sphere is the rush to be first, rather than the emphasis on accuracy and downstream analysis. I think being on the print section, you have some luxury there, a little bit of luxury to have a little more time. Is that correct?
Well, it depends. I mean, again, by the time we found out that for sure it had been this incident, we had about 90 minutes to redo the front page and get the story into the paper. So I mean, we were having conversations during that 90-minute period of, let's not assume this is correct. Even your point about the teleprompter, it looks like it's not broken, but I mean, who knows? It could be on the side there. We just, unless we have absolute verification, we don't want to say it. And I'm not sure yet. Again, first of all, we weren't even 100% sure we were going to be able to say it was a shooting until probably 15 minutes before we were going to close the edition.
Wow.
There were reports as the night evolved that there was a bystander killed. It took a while for us to confirm that, even though other people were reporting it. We didn't want to say it unless we were 100% sure. The gunman, same thing. We didn't know what the status of that person was, even though there were early reports from the DA that I think they were using the phrase neutralized, which almost always means the person was killed. But unless we hear those words that they were killed, we're not gonna report it. So, and the same standard holds for the digital report, by the way. It's a very challenging thing, especially for the digital report, because as you say, they're in the moment. But I mean, there are many, many instances of this, but if you recall the Maine mass shooting in Maine it's probably been a year ago now, but when you watch television, there were reports for a while that the number of people killed was anywhere from like 8 to 50 or something like that. It was just mass chaos, and that's just the nature of these things. But we really almost have each other's backs in terms of like, don't be cautious, be cautious, be cautious.
Sri, if I could jump in with a
Please.
question. Tom, I want to bring up the digital version, the website for the page for the New York Times, to make to frame a question. The decision to call it a shooting versus an assassination attempt. I saw several references to shooting, soon after it happened, but then the New York Times homepage has assassination attempt as a banner headline. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution, and the thinking around that? When is a shooting an assassination attempt?
Well, I know it'll sound a little odd, but somebody could have been firing a gun and just randomly firing a gun and not really deliberately trying to kill the president or the presidential candidate.
Sure.
Until the authorities are convinced that it was a deliberate attempt to kill someone, it's not an assassination attempt. And again, that's where it sounds like splitting hairs a little bit, but that's where we have to be careful. It's a legal definition. So
No, I get that. I mean, sometimes there's a manifesto posted online or something when there's it's a well thought out thing. It's almost, and then in this case, if the shooter was killed, then determining that after the fact is a whole different process. I would assume.
Again, I mean, that's something for the legal authorities. But as far as we're concerned, I think at a certain point last night, after the paper had closed, the authorities became convinced that it was a deliberate attempt to shoot President Trump.
Sure.
So we're just going to switch. Thank you.
Sorry,
I was just going to say they've identified.
There's a picture with the bullet. Yeah, so that's also Doug's picture, right? So
yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And imagine trying to verify this. It was much easier because it's your own photographer that he took that picture. Because we only have a couple of minutes, I want to switch gears, if I could, to talk about Dr. Ruth and the evolution here. In the earlier page you showed us of in the morning edition and the afternoon edition for Sunday, she got a two column obit. And here, because of everything changing, she got a 1-column obit, but she has inside a full page. So can you talk about, because she's obviously a famous person and she's elderly, you already had the obit ready to go. What are the decisions that you need to make on a Sunday, or sorry, on a Saturday to have this ready for Sunday morning?
Well, as you say, it was she was someone who was well known, and what was she, 97,
96.
96. So
Yeah.
we were prepared, and one of the sort of darker elements of our world is that we do have a lot of obituaries written about people that are still alive, but we do that because we want to be able to put the news into the paper or online as soon as possible. So in this case, learning that news again at something like 9:30 or 10 in the morning, it meant that we took another story that we were going to run and held it. It was not a news story, but it's what we call an enterprise story. Held it out of the paper so that we had enough room to put Dr. Ruth both on the front page and in the space that her obituary deserved inside the paper.
I haven't read the story yet, but I presume she gave an interview, like a pre-interview for her obit.
I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that she did what we interviewed her certainly, and
Right.
a lot of times we don't necessarily say we at one point we were doing videos
Yes.
pre-obituary videos with a lot
Yeah.
of people. We have stopped doing that, and I don't know that we necessarily interviewed her saying, hey, tell us what you'd like to be in your obituary, but we've certainly talked with her off and on, and I believe we did a profile of her not too long ago, maybe 9 months ago or so.
Okay. So you're able
Because
to
she had
you're able to use those. I'll just also point
right.
out that Judy Belushi Pisano died, who was the widow of John Belushi, and then there's some amazing pictures here of Dr. Ruth with Penthouse publisher Bob Guccione and Gerard Depardieu, of all people. Like, what a life she lived, right?
She did.
She was in a movie with them, or helped with a movie with
Oh,
Gerard Depardieu.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, I just want to thank Tom Jolly, print editor of the New York Times, for jumping in on a Sunday morning after a very long day and evening yesterday, I'm sure. Before you go, Tom, can you just talk about the role of print at the New York Times today, at a time when everything is digital in the world? Talk about, if you can, how you see your work, and also how you feel about the role of print personally.
Sure. So I think that the way I sort of frame it in my mind, and what I talk to our folks about, is that in the earlier days of my career, the newspaper was the news delivery system, and now that's the digital report. If there's breaking news, you can go to your phone and get that news and get updates. The paper, because it has to be printed at a certain time, put on trucks and delivered, can't be in the moment, obviously. So what we think of ourselves more of as a kind of daily magazine type of news product, where we're going to tell you the news that happens within our news cycle, but we're also going to give you the opportunity to spend more time with stories, especially long stories that are less inviting to read on the phone. We have the advantage of scale. Pictures and graphics and that sort of thing are only about 1.5 inches wide on a phone. We can make them a full page or even bigger than a full page in the newspaper. So we think it's the other difference is that most people are only going to look at 9 to 12 stories on their phone as they scroll along. We give you the opportunity to page through a multitude of sections and stories, and hopefully discover some stuff that you would not have seen on your phone.
Thank you very much. I was just showing folks the business section front about Satya Nadella of Microsoft, and you're right. You see this on the phone and it's so tiny, and to look at it like this is very, very different. Tom, you've been a guest on our show now 4 different times. We're so grateful to you for welcoming us once literally into your home, where we had Sunday newspaper reading with Tom Jolly and bagels that Carla Varanakis brought with
That's
us.
right.
It was so much fun.
It was.
Yeah, but thank you very much for your time, and thank you for all you do. Jonathan says, fascinating discussion. Walter Greaston said, thank you so much, Mr. Jolly. We really appreciate you, and we'll let you get back to your Sunday and your family.
Always great to see you guys. Thanks a lot, Sri.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing to have Tom on such short notice. Neil, well done for pulling that together. And now,
Absolutely.
folks, we're going to reset so that we can give Anna Pakman the time and space to talk with us about such important work that she does. She's a disabilities rights advocate. She's writer, director, and producer of Wheelchair Money, a short film that she'll tell us all about. I have had the pleasure of knowing her for several years, and I'm delighted to welcome her to the New York Times Read Along.
Hi, Sri. Great to be with you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Anna, for being here. Thank you for your patience. We could have let you sleep in 30 minutes longer if we had known that we were going to do this. So I appreciate your stepping up and allowing us to do this. So thank you very much. Can I ask you a question right off the bat that, I as an ally, I need to ask? What is the current use of appropriate use of the term disability, disabilities, things like that? Someone like me who is naive and ignorant may get those things wrong. So I would appreciate us starting there.
Of course. Well, first of all, it's the intent, right? So I think as long as, someone is coming with positive intent, there's a lot of understanding in the community that not everyone may know all the terminology, because honestly, it also shifts. So it depends who you ask when. Generally speaking, people with disabilities or a person with a disability which is considered person first language, is preferred by probably people who are, I would say, my age or older, and disabled people, which is more aligned with identity first language, is the preferred language of people my age and younger. So it really depends. I think either one of those is fine. Style guides that I've personally written kind of use both interchangeably.
Thank you. And how do you feel about terms like differently abled and terms like that some people use?
Yeah, I mean, I think those people are probably trying a little too hard. I think it's okay to say disability. It's okay to say disabled. It's the truth. It is what it is.
Okay, thank you. And this is just some of the learning we're going to get here from Anna. We appreciate Anna's time this morning, folks. This is the New York Times Read Along. We do this every Sunday, or at least most Sundays in the summer. And we talk to interesting people as we read the newspaper together. And Anna will have lots to say about the media and how it covers different people with various disabilities. And but I'd like to have her just tell us her story and how she got involved in the fight for rights for the community.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I've been disabled all of my life, so I have a lot of experience with it personally. And I was born a few years before the ADA was signed. We're coming up on the 34th anniversary on July 26th. And so I am of the generation that grew up with the ADA and have grown up with our rights kind of being codified in federal law and all of these state and local laws that have come as offshoots, or in some cases might have been there before the ADA. And so while we have our rights codified in law, what's the law and what people do in reality are usually two different things. So still to this day, there are places, in my community, I live in the middle of New York City, that are not accessible, that probably should be. I think, we'll talk about the film, and, spoiler alert, the subway system is still very much a no-go zone for a lot of people who use wheelchairs, because very few stations are actually accessible. The MT is working on it, but very few are actually accessible, something like 34%. And also, even for those that are accessible, the elevators aren't very well maintained. So even if you're going to an accessible station, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to get in or out. So, there are huge structural, challenges to fix. And by the way, the MTA is only addressing this because of a lawsuit. And, it's kind of the way the law works is it's on the disabled community to still kind of, fight for these rights where it should be a given. Like the disability advocacy groups should have never had to sue the city and the MTA and the state to make sure that we have basic accessibility to public services just as everyone else. So while we've come a long way, there's still, a long way to go. And coming at it, from a place of, relative privilege, I'm someone who has had the benefit of education, work full time. I do consider it also, a bit of a responsibility to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves, and to make sure that, our voices are out there being heard. And that's kind of what led me to advocacy, to filmmaking as a form of advocacy as well.
Thank you. And this is the film that you made, Wheelchair Money. And you have audio description, which is a way for folks who have hearing issues to be able, or seeing issues to be able to hear and understand the show. So we'll watch the film in a little bit, but you can tell us about the film. But I also have several other questions before we get to that part. But
Sure.
maybe I'll just ask you in terms of the privilege that you talked about. Someone who was watching from the outside would say, how would someone who, like you, even think of having privilege given your situation?
Yeah, I think privilege is relative to different things. So yes, I definitely have, negative privilege when, I'm on the street and trying to hail a taxi and they're passing me by and they refuse to take me because they see me in a wheelchair. For sure. But, I think there's, the benefit of different things of having grown up, for starters, having grown up in the US, because I know your show is a global audience. There are many places in the world where people with disabilities, unfortunately, are not even able to access 10% of their local communities. So, having the ADA, having, things be relatively, much more accessible than other places is a privilege. I think also, again, education being a privilege, having, full-time employment, it, is a privilege as well, because, I'll be honest, a lot of some of these problems are solvable with money. And I can tell you just, from the perspective of going back to the MTA, the way that I get around is they do have a program called Accessoride. And you can, now they've changed it, they've improved it to the point where if you call in advance, you can get authorized to take a taxi and they will reimburse you. And, again, we're very fortunate now, as opposed to, when we met 10, 15 years ago, whatever that was, where accessible Ubers didn't exist. Accessible taxis were few and far between. It is a much, easier way to get around the fact that, most of the system is not that accessible. But, if you think about it, someone who is disabled but is on a fixed income can't afford to do that, can't afford to just, put, that expense on their credit card day in and day out. And wait, 1 to 2 months for, the city, the government to reimburse them for what should be accessible to begin with.
Thank you, folks. That's Anna Pakman. We are talking about her work as a disabilities rights activist. And this is the Sunday New York Times Read Along. Earlier today, at the top of the show, we brought on Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times, to talk about how this story came together on the front page, how they made the paper and all of that. And you can watch the recording of the show right after this on all our platforms. We are an international show, as you point out, so we used the word ADA multiple times, the Americans with Disabilities Act. You and I did a show together on the 30th anniversary of the Disabilities Act. I would love for you to describe it in detail so people can understand. And I'm just going to talk about the political moment. Here we are in this country where it's so divided along so many different lines. It might surprise many Americans, especially, to know that the ADA was signed by George H.W. Bush, a Republican president, creating a law that affected businesses all over the country there were people who were upset about it, including the extra expenses and all of that. The accommodations changed the lives of millions of Americans. And that's typically not something you'll see the Republicans signing up for. So that was that moment in 1990. And if I can go back to 1970, it was also a Republican president in Richard Nixon who signed the EPA and created the Environmental Protection Agency, which the Republicans now want to dismantle. It's in one of the suggestions that President Trump talks about. And finally, when you talk about seat belts, the law that made seatbelts mandatory in the United States was signed by Ronald Reagan, and Elizabeth Dole was his transportation secretary. She was harassed. There were protests, just like we saw with the vaccines and the masking and all of that. So this tells you something about the politics of America changing and the adjustments that people have made. So let's get back to the ADA, why it's important, what it is, and what it has done for millions of people.
Sure. Yeah. So the Americans with Disabilities Act basically says that all public places, as well as all government programs, all places of employment, if there's over, like, I don't recall exactly how many employees it covers, but, you know, most, to your point, Sri, most businesses and actually public entities, because like a lot of things are state or local government run, are responsible for making all, you know, reasonable adjustments to make sure that people with disabilities are able to access goods, services, events, you know, all kinds of places. And it covers everything from being able to get into a restaurant and eat at a restaurant to, you know, not being discriminated against if you're trying to get, you know, a job with, like, let's say the EPA or something like that, or, you know, any, you know, company that you can think of. So, and there are a lot of misconceptions about the law. And, you know, I think the main thing, you know, that the law covers, you know, that's important, you know, like the spirit of the ADA is just that everyone should be able to access everything, and that having a disability shouldn't prevent that. And it's interesting because I think classically, like, disability has been looked at through, you know, various different lenses, you know, the first being the medical model of, like, your problems are the result of, you know, you're not being able to walk or you're not being able to hear, versus, and I think that kind of like focuses on, oh, you know, like, this is something that either we're going to try to heal, and a lot of things like are not healable, but also, like, it doesn't look at people from the lens of, like, America being like a very consumerist country, of looking at us as potential customers. And once that shift happens, once people realize, like, hey, like, you know what, if I'm not getting in the door, my wallet's not getting in the door, my credit card's not getting in the door, that kind of like helps shift their thinking and understanding of, like, as a business, how this also benefits them. And I think, like, businesses have come a long way in kind of getting to that place. And it's, you know, like, part of, like, why we see more businesses, same with, like, LGBTQ Pride Month, getting on board and, you know, kind of celebrating Disability Pride Month with us. But, you know, also, I think the government is a little bit slower in realizing, like, hey, if you get rid of these barriers to employment, because a lot of disabled people, actually the majority of disabled people, are not in employment, particularly people with severe disabilities who need assistance with everyday activities, because it actually, like, the government puts so many disincentives in place for people who might want to work, but then can't afford to lose government benefits that pay for their aids or pay for their health care, and therefore just don't go into the workplace. And it's such a missed opportunity, because not only, like, are we as a, you know, society missing out on a lot of talent, but it makes no sense, because, like, here's, you know, a base of income that could be taxed and that could, you know, self-pay for these services. So it's like kind of like a really weird self-fulfilling prophecy. And I know some, you know, governments or entities, like, are trying to work on that, but it's definitely not coming fast enough.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Here's Kimberly saying thank you for your advocacy, Anna. And we need folks advocating, and Patty's put in the hashtag wheelchair money. So I think what we're going to do is it's a 5-minute film. We're not going to show the whole thing because we want everyone to watch it on their own on YouTube. But Neil's going to show us the first part. Can you set it up for us, Anna? And then Neil will play the first 2 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Actually, maybe why don't we do the first minute for friends at SAG. This is a short film that I made this past spring. I made it as part of the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. The Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge is a global competition that challenges filmmaking teams to make short films that are 5 minutes in length or less. We have 5 days to do it. And that includes everything from setting up the sets, shooting the film, editing the film, all of like that stuff that goes into post-production that takes most people months and months and months. We have to do it in 5 days. And the goal of all of these films being made, and by the way, everyone should go to the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge YouTube or Facebook page and watch all of the films. There's over 100 this year. There are so much amazing talent. And the goal is really to raise awareness, one, of the talent in the disability community, both in front of and behind the camera. My film, about, I want to say 70, 80% of everyone involved has a disability. 100% of the actors that you will see in the film are disabled actors. Also to raise awareness of just important topics. As I was alluding to earlier, one of the things that, I wanted to, really talk about is the accessibility of our public spaces and cities and how those challenges disproportionately impact people with disabilities, particularly wheelchair users like myself. So Wheelchair Money follows Johnny, who is a young man who uses a wheelchair, mobility scooter, and he actually is looking to get a new wheelchair that better suits his needs, but of course is having trouble getting his insurance company to pay for it because, as people around the world know, American healthcare is pretty garbage. And then, he goes on this quest to sell, and you'll see it, something that is very special to him, but, kind of funny that that's what it is, given, that we see this big, handsome man trying to sell this item. So he goes on a quest to sell this thing, goes around across New York City and encounters a number of challenges with getting around.
So
All
Anna,
right,
I just want to ask you a quick question. Sorry, Sri. Before we jump in, I heard you mention we only want to show 1 minute because of SAG rules, I guess. Would you recommend, when I looked at the video, can we start 30 seconds in since you gave the setup? Because we'll show some of the challenges that he faces,
Sure.
I think, as opposed to just the setup piece. So with your permission, we will pull that slider up right around here. So this is where his friend, I can't remember her name, but he's getting him to strategize how to get money for his wheelchair. Let's go ahead and press play.
Sounds great.
And give me a thumbs up if you hear the audio.
On the talk, if they can get you a new
No audio. 1 second.
No, it's audio. We're hearing.
chair.
Like, who's going to give a complete stranger a $20,000 power wheelchair? Besides, you only have like 17 followers.
If you don't manifest, you don't get. Or you can finally sell that.
No. Give me that. That's my Princess Diana bear. Like, Felicia gave me this. Like,
Y'all broke up 7 years ago and she still lives in your head rent-free. Evict her.
why you always got to be like that?
Says here that bear is worth $500,000.
$500,000? I could do a lot of things with that. I could quit my city job that I hate so much, get a new wheelchair, even take that trip to London. You're right.
I could quit my job too.
What job? You don't have a job. You live here rent free.
So you're trying to tell me
The only Toys R Us in New York City is all the way in Brooklyn. These elevators never work.
And we'll stop it there. Maybe a little over, Anna, my apologies. But we saw them get to the
Cliffhanger.
elevator.
A cliffhanger, yeah.
And that's just the start of the challenge of trying to go from Manhattan to Brooklyn, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
In a wheelchair. I'll encourage folks to watch the show. I put the link in Facebook. It's also on our website. One quick thing in terms of the different versions of the video. You have one, I'll call it a standard video, the standard short film, but you also have the audio descriptive version, right? You have two different versions out there. Can you talk about what it took to make the audio the one with the audio description? How do you do that?
Yeah, so all forms of accessibility are incredibly important, and so I was very excited that we were able to do that this year. This was done actually by the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge team, and so the way it works is you have a voice actor essentially read some of the action lines that if someone who has sight is watching a video, like what would be something that a non-seeing audience member would miss if they were watching it. So like those material moments, there was, so anyone, who's interested and wants to watch the audio described version, you'll notice that at the very beginning, there's a setup that describes how the characters look. And I actually, like, my bad, I should have given a visual description just in case anyone needs it at the start of the show. So I'll do it now. So I am a Caucasian appearing woman with curly brown hair almost to my shoulders. I'm wearing a satin pink blouse. There's a virtual background behind me that's of the Brooklyn Bridge, just because I live in a New York City apartment and I don't really want you to see it.
And it's featured in the show, right?
Exactly, it's featured in the film.
short.
And then we should do that too. And I'm Sri. I am a South Asian Indian American man. I am 53. I have no hair. I am wearing a beautiful shirt with it's black or navy blue with flowers on it, which I love. Neil, over to you. And I'm sitting in a conference room because my apartment is full of guests and friends. So Neil, over to you.
Sure. I am also a South Asian American male, similar age to Sri, 51 years old. The big difference is I do have hair, and I point that out, Anna, even when we don't do these kinds of descriptions. I have glasses. I am wearing a very plain white shirt, which is more my style. And I have headphones, corded headphones, so it looks like I'm a director. That's very intentional. Behind me is my favorite office chair, which my mom does not like. It's a red sports type, gamer chair. And my background are pictures from Maui in 2022. You can see me and my daughter took. There's one of her snorkeling in the top corner. And one of a turtle that she took, and then other landscape. What you may not notice, and if you can't tell, behind me, right on my side here, bottom left, is a picture of Reggie Jackson in full swing that I haven't put up yet, but I still have it in frame.
So let's tell everyone, Reggie Jackson is a former retired baseball player, Hall of Famer for the New York Yankees,
my
Neil's
favorite team.
And I will say there's a connection to our topic here today. From 1966 to 2018, baseball, Major League Baseball, as Anna may know, used the term disabled list to announce any players who are not available to play. If it's for a day, a week, a month, a year, they would say, these are the guests, these are the players on the DL. That was something we grew up with, and it was ingrained as part of baseball. But disabilities rights activists spoke up and said it made it sound like people who have disabilities can't play baseball.
Absolutely.
And so in a big change for baseball, they changed the name from the DL to the IL to the injured list. And that's actually more accurate anyway, but it also was the right thing to do. And Anna, I bring this all up just to say that it really matters what folks like you do, because you help make change. Society is very comfortable with the status quo on so many things, and folks like you have made a difference. I will say, the thing I point out about the ADA to people who don't have disabilities, who are unsure about the value of it, I say every curb cutout that you have in New York City is because of the ADA, so that wheelchairs can go, but so can baby strollers, so can bicycles, all kinds of allies and people who are not disabled can benefit from what's happened. Also, as people age into just being older, to have things in the home that are more accessible, in stores, all of that is a really good thing. Liz says, thank you for the audio described version. That was really good that we were able to do that. I want to acknowledge some people watching. Macron says the ADA at Water Fountain also addresses racism. Light sensors make better calibration for darker skins. A lot of people don't know that when those automatic water, faucets and things, that if you don't adjust for darker skin, it doesn't work for some of us. And it says that the ADA being a law, even a single complaint is not left to the management's discretion to fix. I think that's a really important point, Anna, in terms of how we think about this. I'll do a couple more greetings and we'll come back to you. Ronald Thomas, great friend of the show, former guest, who was with me in New York. He's usually watching from Dubai. He's here in New Jersey. Call me. We've got to get together before you head back. And Patty says, wheelchair on Broadway made me smile. And Patty also asks about CJ Jones. He's doing groundbreaking work for the deaf community. And Patty also points out that Neil is kind of a golf shirt kind of guy. And Patty also puts in a cheer for the Yankees. So let's get back to you, Anna, and your thoughts on all the things that I was just saying.
Yeah, and first of all, I do have to give a shout out to my friend CJ, who is an amazing advocate, amazing actor, just fantastic human.
One technical note, Anna, I know that you may have issues with your computer. If you mute your computer but unmute your phone, we'll get better audio, and I'll put the audio, add your phone to the screen. There we go. Now, Anna, say something. No, you have to unmute your phone, actually.
Okay.
Whoa, that did not work.
Okay. Let's
turn the speaker off on your computer.
Yeah. So I think this is better.
There we go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. There we go. Thank you, Neil. Yeah. So just want to. Sri, just if we could quickly reset, what was the last question?
Yeah, so I was just asking you, of CJ Jones and the deaf community. Yeah. There was a question about that, and we also talked a little bit about baseball and the role of advocates in making change. The getting the DL to change to IL is a very big change for folks who care about baseball.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am not one of those people who care about baseball. I did have the pleasure of visiting Cooperstown recently and really loved it. And, if anyone's looking for
Neil's head is exploding in the back. You don't know about this.
No. You don't care about baseball, but you did go to Cooperstown. I care about baseball, but I haven't been to Cooperstown.
Oh my God, you've not been to Cooperstown? They should have a whole wing just for you so that you can visit properly. Oh my God.
Can I ask? While we're talking about it, Anna, can I ask, how was Cooperstown for someone in a wheelchair? How was that experience?
It was actually great. I will say, it's interesting also, the experience of being a New York City person with a disability versus like being a person who probably lives almost anywhere else in America, because America has such a car culture. Yes. And in New York City, we just don't drive because it's actually counterproductive here. And so I was fortunate to go on a road trip with a friend who does, actually a couple of friends. And so from that perspective, we had an accessible van, and it was very easy to get around. And I think for the most part, the village has done a really great job of just, from the perspective of like going down the streets, of course, not all the souvenir stores were accessible, but like, about half of them were. from the perspective of someone who doesn't care about baseball, I personally don't know the difference. Maybe if you were there and you were like, oh my God, I can't get to the one place that like had that one ball, so I bet that one guy, it would have made more of a difference. But yeah, I had a great experience there, and I should also say, like I'm here in my personal capacity, but I do my full-time job is with I Love New York, so I do have a little bit of a reason to go to various places in the state, even if I don't particularly partake in that pastime. And what I do have to say that Cooperstown has going for is there's just so much to do there. It would surprise most people. And so much of it is not related to baseball. So even if you don't like baseball, it's just a really fun place, a great place to visit.
So I might be able to convince my wife to go there. That's any antiquing or well,
Yeah, a
we can
lot of
talk about that
antiquing.
later.
There's a lot of
I'll send you
antiquing.
an itinerary. How about that?
Call me.
Yeah.
I do want, on a serious note though, Sri, if you don't mind, I want to get back to something that you raised at the top of the show. We've had a lot of people join later, midstream. Of course, I encourage everyone to go back when the show is over to watch our excellent segment with Tom Jolly talking about breaking news and how the front page evolved, showing us the afternoon edition yesterday before the shooting attempt, the assassination attempt on former President Trump. But I wanted to actually highlight, Anna, the answer you gave to Sri to his very first question, on that question of what is the right terminology to use. People with disabilities, disabled people, differently abled, etc. And I was actually incredibly surprised, shocked, I would say, frankly. It was you shared the generational difference that people your age and older prefer the term people with disabilities because it's people centered, right? If I understand
Mhm.
correctly. And then mostly people younger than you prefer disabled people because it's, I forget the term you use, but differently centered, right? In terms of the term.
Identity first. Yeah. And I would
Right?
say actually I'm right in that middle section. I'm 21. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not. But as I mentioned before, you can do the math. I was born a few years before the ADA. But yeah, it's just a split. And I think, it's kind of gotten to the point where people are okay with it interchangeably.
And the reason I bring that up is that from my work with United Way for a number of years, particularly for around people who are have challenges with housing, the term that we really focused on was people experiencing homelessness, not
Mhm.
someone who is homeless, because that now in that sense that's not necessarily a permanent condition that can change by the day, etc. So if someone's experiencing something, if there's someone who has a disability, maybe that's the difference, that it's not a temporary condition, that this may be an actual long-term issue. But I wanted to just thank you for that clarification, because that was something that was very eye-opening for me and hopefully for our audience as well.
Yeah,
Sri, back to you.
certainly was. Here's Doug Levy with a question. A disabled rights activist told me a few days ago not to have speakers at conferences describe themselves or their clothing because that's not useful. What's a good guideline for video description? And I want to point out, the community isn't a monolith, so different people have different uses and different utility for different things that people see. So just because this person told Doug that it's not useful doesn't mean that other people wouldn't find it useful. So for allies, how do we not just react to the last person we listen to? And that last person may not be someone who is an activist, it may be just their lived experience. And doesn't mean we discount that, but we want to talk to and take guidelines from people who know more, right? So, and in this case, that was an activist who told him not to say it. So how do we respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point there, Sri. The community is not a monolith. You're going to get as many opinions as there are people that you ask. I think, though, and again, this is where I don't want to center myself as like someone who does not have any visual impairment. I think also it's important to keep in mind that disabilities are different. So I take my lead from people who are blind or visually impaired, and that is, kind of where that practice at most disability events actually comes from, is from the blind community. And, in terms of what, individual people might find useful or not, might depend on their level of disability, but they might not be thinking more broadly of others who might be more disabled than they are in that sense.
Thank you. Folks, we have about 30 minutes left with Anna. We still have to go through the paper, Anna, so we've got lots to do. One of the points Patty makes is that there are things that a lot of non-disabled people take for granted. And of course, we should talk for a minute about that other side. What is the right term for people who aren't disabled? We don't want to use words like normal or regular. So what do you folks use, or some folks use, about some people who are not disabled?
Yeah, so I mean, non-disabled, I think, is a fine term. Something that I think is a little bit provocative that, I've started using more recently, as like we've had some of these debates with like COVID, and I think people don't necessarily realize, because the government, doesn't, like they want to have like that victory lap. Oh my God, like, Joe Biden recently said we ended the pandemic. Well, no, that's not true. Like the WHO, the World Health Organization, says that we're still in a pandemic and people still are getting very sick. People are still dying from COVID. And the bigger issue, not to make light of death, but I think at this point in the pandemic, the bigger issue is actually that we're in a mass disabling event, that the World Health Organization has said, and they have done research, that about 10% of COVID cases end up resulting in post-COVID conditions, including long COVID, which can be extremely debilitating. And so a term, to kind of get people to be more thoughtful about, like, hey, maybe if you're sick, stay home, or like, if you must go out, wear a mask so you don't pass it along to other people, is that everyone is at risk, because, the people who are not disabled are not yet disabled, because, I think you mentioned it earlier too, particularly as people age, everyone is, one unfortunate situation, whether it's COVID, whether it's a car accident, whether it's any number of things, from joining the disability community. We actually are the only minority that anyone can join at any point in their life. So anyone who is against accessibility is actually working against their own best interest, because at a certain point, everyone is going to need accommodations for something in one way or another. And, that's why everyone should want these, accommodations to exist, and everyone should want everything to be as universally accessible as possible, because you never know when you're going to be the person who needs it.
Thank you. We're going to rush through some comments and then we're going to get to the paper. Makran says sports facilities and the Athletic Disability Act was the basis for major Olympic reforms around the world. Total transformation in mandates for adoptability of architecture, planning, design, infrastructure. Thank you, Makran, for that. Kimberly says, thank you for the educational enlightenment and perspectives. It really helps us connect with empathy. Beautifully said. And Liz Pressman says, Doug Levy, I love hearing descriptors of what people are wearing and how they look and their surroundings. Shout out to Netflix and their amazing descriptors. I just watched Survival of the Thickest, filled with fashion, art, and action descriptors. I'm legally blind, and otherwise all I see is blurry colors. So this is the point that I think is important, that the accommodations are worth it if it makes difference for one person, whether it's a wheelchair, whether it's accessibility in some other form, that makes a difference. And a lot of the programs that we do, Digimentors does a lot of professional programs for clients, and those you see the American Sign Language being used. Our clients hire ASL descriptive folks who do the signing, but internationally it's not uniform, right? Even the ASL is not something that everybody uses. So it's very interesting to learn that, and this is all part of all of us learning all the time. And Neil, you might have a thought on that too.
Yeah, it's they have an international sign language that they use, and one thing that's actually really interesting about that, when we do produce those shows, Anna, it's one thing to have when you have ASL interpreters; they can be on the screen, they're hearing what is happening and then signing right for the audience. When we have international sign language, at least the firms that we've worked with, the standard has been to have two interpreters. The international sign language interpreter is actually deaf themselves, so they're a deaf interpreter, and they have a partner who is connecting with them on another video link, a separate Zoom channel or something, who can hear the show, and they're signing to them what is being said, and so then the deaf interpreter can sign in international sign language. I don't know if you've seen that in action or familiar with that.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's
So
fascinating.
we have and we always have two people signing, so that people can trade off. So we have four people when we do an international sign language show, mostly for the UN.
And I
so we have
presume, Neil, that was also great because it gives employment to these deaf folks who can do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And that's the standard.
It's an absolute standard. I mean, when we work with firms and they ask for this, when we reach out to the company that's providing the interpretation, that's just standard operating procedure. So it was really interesting when I first learned that.
Thank you. Liz says, shout out to the Apple Store on the Upper West Side. They are amazingly inclusive, and they treat me like a regular person and read to me when I can't read and describe when I can't see. They're way ahead of the curve. And Liz, I would ask you, how are they on the wheelchair side, if you've been to the Upper West Side store or any of the Apple stores?
I actually have not been to the Upper West Side Apple Store, but I have been to some of them in other areas of the city, and I would say, yes, they're definitely very accessible. I do want to, I want to acknowledge something that Neil just said, because I think we all have an opportunity to learn here, and I really appreciate Neil for bringing up that international sign language model, because I hadn't heard about that before. So thank you for teaching me something new today. I do want to actually touch on, you mentioned employment and, the fact that these deaf interpreters, it kind of gives them that opportunity, because a big reason for me in making these short films, because, maybe one day, hopefully, we are working on actually expanding this to, we're going to be working on a pilot or a feature that I'm going to be busy writing later this summer to expand on wheelchair money, because we've had a lot of great feedback, and it got a lot of views when we first released it in the spring. So really want to, we see a big opportunity to kind of expand this universe and these storylines and get more of these storylines out there. But the fact of the matter is that we just all as people, like, the information we get is mainly driven by what's in the media, right? So like, if you're not on TV, if you're not in the New York Times, you don't exist. And that's, a major motivator for me as a filmmaker and an activist, to address that problem, because growing up, like, I don't remember seeing anyone who looked like me. Okay, like, maybe there was like that one girl on Saved by the Bell in one scene, and she was in like the jankiest wheelchair they could find. And that's just not representative of the disability community. So the more that we can get people in employment in the media industry, which of course is like just such a tall order, because there's so much going on in the industry. I think everyone's just trying to find their way, and there's so many challenges between the strikes and the business models kind of being topsy-turvy due to streaming and figuring out how to monetize that. I actually worked on the TV side, and I worked in news for a few years, so kind of like come from those worlds as well when I think about this stuff. But like a big thing is, according to the CDC, people with disabilities are 25% of the U.S. population. And it's kind of similar worldwide, because, like, people with disabilities exist everywhere. But at least in the U.S. on TV, less than 5% of the characters that we see in scripted television have a disability. So that just is, if you think about disproportionate opportunity for actors with disabilities, talking about like our friends at SAG and everything. And it's even worse, actually, behind the scenes, because, I think we talk a lot about, visibility of actors. And I think someone said, they love to see wheelchairs on Broadway, and shout out to my friend Ali Stroker, who was the first person in a Broadway musical who uses a wheelchair, and she's a Tony winner. And she's done so many amazing things, since. My friend Ryan Haddad, who was on a Hulu show, and just like, we're starting to see, more of that. Steve Way, Shannon DeVito, folks that, I can start kind of rattling off. But behind the scenes, less than 1% of the writers on these shows have a disability. I imagine, like, no one's even counting the executives. So the fact that there's not that representation behind the scenes is also what's limiting the representation of what we see, the storylines we see, what gets greenlit. to be on camera. So, that's another, aspect of it that we really need to change. And we need more diversity there, more disability inclusion there.
I want to jump in, Sri, with two questions. I know we want to get to the paper, but there are two burning questions I have. One, Anna, with representation in Hollywood and the media. When you have shows where a character has a physical disability, and the actor does not have that disability, is that the equivalent of brown face or blackface? When you have white actors, Short Circuit is the example that comes to mind, playing an Indian character, but they're not. Can you speak to that? I think ER may have been an example of that, but there are others over time.
Yeah, we call it crip face, and it's wrong. All of those examples that you brought up are wrong, and it's equally problematic to have people who are not disabled, even just from the perspective of like that means that like there's an actor with a disability that then can't get work, and there's an argument that's often made by producers of like, oh, but we need people who can sell tickets, or people who can generate streams for our names. And like, yes, you do need those people, and you have plenty of like non-disabled characters that you could cast the A-list celebrities at. Like, I don't think it's an unsolvable problem, and it's sort of a chicken or the egg thing too. It's like if you don't give actors with disabilities like the opportunity and like these various roles earlier on, like how are they supposed to become a household brand?
And we have seen several in the last several years come to the fore. The other point I wanted to make is we're talking about physical and visible disabilities. Because of the work that I'm doing, Sri, around mental health, there are also invisible disabilities. People with depression, anxiety, debilitating mental illness that often get overlooked. It's hard to explain that to people if you have that kind of challenge. So I want to throw that out as well.
Thank you. Very, very important. I will just point out one case that I believe is a good example of casting is in the show Breaking Bad, where the son, who's a pivotal character, is in almost the entire series, is played by, is a character who has cerebral palsy, and the actor RJ Mitty has cerebral palsy and plays him, and they address his disability and its impact on the family and his life in sometimes very very graceful ways. That show, of course, is criticized a lot for how it treats Hispanic characters. So that's a whole other issue, how everyone's a villain and everything else. So even where some shows can do something right in one sphere, can get some things wrong in another sphere and get problems with that. Liz says, Neil, that's so important. Thank you. And Mission Possible, says Patty. So what we're going to do now is we have about 15 minutes to just glance through the paper, and I want to get Anna's thoughts on the news, because as she said, the media plays a big role in the acceptance and encouragement of people with disabilities. So let's take a look at the paper. This is the front page of the New York Times, and we are looking at the big headline on the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And we talked to Tom Jolly earlier, so you can watch the first 15 minutes of this recording, which will be on right after we're done, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Digimentors.group. You'll see the changes that happened. And here you'll see how Hollywood's big donors broke with Biden, and Israel targets a commander in a safe zone, and post-October 7th, Hamas became a ghost army. So they got two stories about the Gaza war here, and the Wimbledon story of the women's final yesterday. The men's final is going on today. Today's a big sports day. Wimbledon now at 9 a.m. Eastern. It's now 9:45. Alcaraz is leading Djokovic. I just checked. And later, the Euro finals, which are Germany versus England, or sorry, Spain versus England. And then Copa America is Argentina versus Colombia. So that's going to be a big sports day for folks. We're just glancing through the paper here, and I'll see if there's anything that grabs my attention, and you can do that too as well. Anna, if you see any story here, broad impact of fatal attack in German city of immigrants. And I should have mentioned, if you wanted to say anything about Dr. Ruth as a New Yorker, Anna, if you wanted to mention her or react to her passing in any way.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting her at an event a few years ago, and she's just such a, a spark of joy. So it's definitely a big loss, but a life well lived.
Thank you. And that's beautifully put. Hunter College called their office for disabled students the Office of Possibilities when my son was there a few years ago. So how do you react to that? Someone like me thinks, oh, that's really cool. Do some people think that, it's too much? How do you feel?
Yeah, I kind of laugh when I see those things because it's kind of unnecessary.
Okay. All right. Here we're looking through the paper. There's a big ad for someone who makes just recycled bags. That's interesting. For Ukraine, an irreversible path to NATO remains clouded by uncertainty. More about these stories from Gaza. This is a look at the landslide that took place in the UK, Labour Party winning. And when you look at graphics like this, Anna, as someone who looks at it from understanding disabled folks, you have vision, so you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
What should journalists keep in mind when they're doing graphics? The size matters, right, of the text, the color, contrast, things like that. If you have any thoughts, please jump in.
Yeah, well, I work a lot with design agencies in my work, and I do think it's something that everyone needs to be more mindful of. I think actually the guidelines for digital design can be particularly useful for print because I don't think anyone ever, kind of put together clear guidelines for print in the way that they did digital, but it's kind of like, all the same issues of making sure things are have enough contrast to be readable, particularly if you have different data charts. So those are called the WCAG guidelines, and I would urge everyone, who is involved in design to keep those in mind and to take a look at those, because I think one thing also is, Sri, you mentioned something earlier about how the curb cut effect, right? Like the easier you make things to read for people with, visual disabilities, the easier you make it for everyone, actually.
Great, thank you. This is one of the stories here about India. Artists and brides find a shared joy in henna parties. This is something like, if you're Indian, you're like, oh God, why are they writing this? This is so obvious. But to outsiders, this is interesting and different. And I'm sure that's the same thing with some stories about disabled people as well, right, Anna? Where
Yep.
we think that's new because it's what we are encountering that's new, but you and others who are disabled live with it every day. Homeless enforcement. We had a good conversation earlier. Neil brought up thinking about how you describe the homeless. People who are experiencing homeless versus calling someone a homeless person. In here are some of the photographs just as President Trump was hit. In fact, you can see the bullet flying in Doug Mills's photograph, which is pretty stunning. And here are people who were protesting the election over here on January 6th. They're listed there. Let's see what else is in the paper today. Giuliani's assets at risk as case is dismissed. We're making obesity medications, but we know it's about health. And this is Eli Lilly. I guess it's now just called Lilly. And this is the story about Jaws that would have been on the front page, which was removed from the front page. And are you scared of sharks?
I mean, I think everyone has a healthy fear of sharks.
Here's a whole thing about Mars and Elon Musk. Surprising no one, Elon endorsed Trump yesterday, saying, I fully endorse Donald Trump and pray for his recovery. You can pray for his recovery without endorsing him, but he had to endorse him because that's what he was always going to do. There's an ad here for Overlooked. We did an interview with Amy Padnani, who's the author of this book and former obituary editor of the New York Times, about remarkable people, including folks with various abilities who are in this, totally worth reading. So lots going on here. Dr. Ruth got a full page obit. Here is the Sunday business section and Microsoft's high stakes gamble. How do you think about the role of AI for disabled people in terms of accessing things and being able to create content? If it makes it easier for people who are non-disabled, doesn't it also make it easier for people who are disabled? So can you talk about that? And this story is about Satya's investment and bet on AI, and it's already paid off, obviously. Microsoft is now a $1 trillion company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think anything that, in terms of AI, in terms of creating content, like saving time, not having to type as much, it's definitely a game changer. I mean, I'll tie it back to the film. Actually, if you watch the full film and you stay for the credits, the music at the end of Wheelchair Buddy was a song I created using an audio AI platform. And I'm someone, not for disability reasons, but we all have our talents and we all have things that we are very, very not good at. So I have no musical talent whatsoever. And, trying to produce a film on a micro budget, it's not like you could go out and just hire a composer to create a completely new song. So it was really cool to be able to just put the plot of the film into the AI generator and to get something that, I think really kind of is on the money, no pun intended.
Excellent. And everyone, please check out Wheelchair Money. You can just Google it. These days, it's so hard to come up with a term or a title for a film that is unique. But when you just type in Wheelchair Money, your film pops up first. So that's pretty cool that you're able to do that, especially, of course, if you have it as one word, but it even works as two words. So I congratulate you on your SEO skills there, Anna.
Thank you.
And let's see what else. We just have a few more minutes. The Sunday Styles cover is Scarlett Johansson, a glimpse behind the curtain, how she manages having it all and can still so go grocery shopping unnoticed. I'm surprised she can. By the way, Neil has put on the screen the mailing list information for this show. If you'd like to get an email once a week of what we're doing for that week and who our guests are and links to everything, please ask him. Please ask for that. And the Sunday opinion cover is he failed the test of leadership and betrayed America. Voters must reject him in November. And this is the key to everyone from the right who has been blaming the Democrats for yesterday's shooting, saying Biden's rhetoric is the reason why the shooting happened. What Biden and others have been saying is that he must be stopped in November at the ballot box. They're not saying go shoot him. No one's saying that. And he's unfit to lead. And this is also comes after a lot of criticism, as you know, Anna, when the New York Times editorial board asked him to resign, asked Biden to step down, but did not ask Trump to step down. And so now they are asking him to step down. And if you don't want to get into the politics, that's fine. You don't have to. Here is the metropolitan section, prayer shawls and rainbow banners. The rabbi who created a home for the city's LGBTQ community is retiring. This is about Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum. Big shout out to her. So thank you, Rabbi. And here's the arts and leisure. Since you're a filmmaker now, you can talk a little bit about what you're watching these days. The front page is No Time to Be Boxed In with lead roles in X, Pearl, and the new movie Maxine. Mia Goth has embraced the horror genre and it has embraced her back, but she's ready to branch out. I'm sorry to say I don't know who this person is.
Me neither.
Okay. I consider you super cool and knowing all the pop culture stuff that I don't know. So there's some comfort for me in there. How about House of Dragons? Do you watch that?
I do. I love the House of Dragons.
Do you love it more than the original?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Are you serious? Is it that close? I can't believe it's that close.
It is close. I would say probably not, but it's very close. It's very close.
Maybe I'll reconsider watching the new shows because I love the first episodes. I mean the first show, but I didn't take to the second. But now I might listen to you. All right, real estate for buyers in Manhattan. Cash takes on an outside role, and this is one of the things a recent study, Anna, said that housing in New York is now at a 55-year unequal or inaccessible, in terms of people being able to afford housing is at an all-time low or something like that. And that's not even counting folks who have disabilities who need to afford homes.
Well, it's an interesting point because it's further exacerbated by disability. Because if you think about it, the places that are on, relatively, not, I think at this point, like nothing in New York is that affordable, but like on the more affordable end of things are places, let me just turn on my, sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries.
Okay, so, for the places that tend to be more accessible, they tend to be in luxury buildings that are pricier. The things that tend to be more affordable tend to be in walk-ups, which someone like myself can't even think about accessing.
And that's fundamentally unfair that that's the situation. And as you said, money solves a lot of problems in America and the world today. Emily Nussbaum has a book called Cue the Sun, about reality TV. And by the way, that's one of my favorite lines of any film. And I recommend the movie, The Truman Show, where Ed Harris is an executive producer like Neil, wearing the headphones, and says, "Cue the sun." And it's an incredible Jim Carrey film. I don't know if either of you have seen it. I recommend it highly. Everyone should see it. And then the last thing we'll look at is the New York Times Magazine cover. I could have sworn this is Kevin Spacey, but it's not. Life after a kidnapping. 50 years ago, Jack Teish was abducted at gunpoint and held for ransom, but it didn't seem to haunt him, and that's what's haunted me, by Taffy Brodesser Ackner. I was told about this at dinner the other day, so so I'm looking forward to reading that. And the writer is basically reacting to this person not reacting to or not being haunted forever by this. When you read the paper, do you look through like gossip columns and things like that? Are you into those things?
I have to confess, I don't read the paper. I get my news online.
Okay, yeah, no, but when you read online, do you chase the non-important stuff, the fun stuff?
Sometimes.
Okay. All right. Last thing I'm gonna do is just at the style section, they have the etiquette columnist. And so I'm always looking for a etiquette column to stump my guess. There's no right or wrong answer. Too many kids at camp is the headline. I'm 11 and a half. I begged my parents to let me go to sleepaway camp. They wanted me to go to the babyish day camp near our house again. I said no. So now I'm at camp and I hate it. There are kids everywhere. What do I do? And of course, to point out that summer camp, at least when I was growing up, I know those kinds of places weren't accessible to people in wheelchairs and stuff. So if you have a thought on either of that, what should 11 and a half-year-old Max do?
Oh, Max, my friend. Look at this as an opportunity to make new friends. Find the kids who share your interests. It's and stay away from the ones that don't. You don't have to be friends with everyone, but I think it's an opportunity to branch out. And maybe you'll meet someone you think is pretty cool. I had such a great summer camp experience. Shout out to the Southampton Fresh Air Home. It's a great summer camp, great organization. I was there both as a camper and then as a counselor. It's actually my first job ever. It is a camp for kids with disabilities out in Southampton, New York. And they're still going. I think, I think it's their 125th anniversary, something like that. But they do incredible work.
Thank you. Great to know about that camp, so everyone should know about. This column, by the way, is by Philip Gallanz. And Neil, we have not had him on the show yet. We love his column. So here's what he says. Again, no right or wrong answer. He says, I felt the same way about Camp Max. And even though I never loved it, it got better once I found my people. Spend as much time as possible doing activities you like and don't be afraid to hang out with adults. The camp nurse was my favorite. Keep me posted, okay? And basically, you had the similar answer. So well done on that. What we're going to do, Anna, we're going to take you off camera for a moment, let you catch your breath. And Neil and I are going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to come back to you just to give us some final thoughts and also do a plug for your show, your film, and how people can support the Disabilities Film Challenge and all the other good stuff you do. So we're going to bring you right back. Folks.
That's assuming, Anna, we can go a little past the 10 o'clock hour. We already hit 10 o'clock. With your permission, we'll go a little bit longer, if that's okay. Thank
I'm
you.
game. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. And Neil, what a show. Anna was terrific. Tom was terrific. I learned a lot from Anna, and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful to her. Neil, we love doing these shows. We do them on Sundays, 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern. This time we're going a little past 10. Tell us what we have coming up.
Absolutely. Our next show, we're able to reschedule Julie Shelfo. She is the founder. She's a former guest on the show, but in the intervening years, she's the founder of Mothers Against Media Addiction, acronym MAMA. And I'm particularly looking forward to that. It's all about kids and social media. And they've been doing some great advocacy work. This is a conversation that's taking place almost daily in my house with an 11-year-old. Sri, you wrote about it in your most recent newsletter. Social media is the new cigarettes, and riffing off of Surgeon General's warning around social media. So that should be an excellent show next week, next Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time.
On
We
Facebook, LinkedIn,
on
YouTube, yeah, all of those, Instagram.
Yeah, all the channels, and hopefully Twitter next
Yeah.
week. We will see.
Elon Musk has not allowed me to have Twitter for 2 months now, and my life in some ways is better, some ways is worse.
Yeah.
We want to do a couple of things. So this show is brought to you by our friends at Muckrack. We are so grateful to them. Everyone who's in communications, either on the journalism side or the PR side, knows Muckrack. Please check them out. Please support them. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, Sri at Digimentors.group or Neil at Digimentors.group. And Digimentors is our company that does all kinds of digital work, including marketing, PR, stratcoms, training, and workshops. I'm doing AI workshops around the world. I'm leaving on Monday to go to Chicago to do training. This is how I used to look, Anna, once upon a time. I had hair, and now I don't. And we also do AI scenario planning, policy, strategy. So anyone who needs help with AI, please contact us. Just email me or just write to me, Sri at Digimentors.group. We also want to give a shout out to Neil and the shows he does with Shining a Light on Shadows twice a month. He and Don do an amazing job talking about mental health. I don't think we do enough in this country to talk about this. This was the most recent episode, Sarah Wilson talking about teen girls in therapy on July 11th. This was last Thursday. And Neil and his 11-year-old daughter produced a blog post that I recommend everybody read. And Neil says it's never too early to talk about difficult issues with your child. You may be surprised at how well it goes. So everyone, please check it out. And Neil, I want to know what Emily thought of the show.
Emily hasn't seen it yet. But she helped me with the blog post. I want to mention, so my friend Sarah Wilson, who's a therapist, wrote a blog post that frames several issues for teen girls that come up in her practice. She sees teen girls and young adult girls, everything from social media to body image issues to sexuality, and several others. And I was able to use that as a framework for a conversation with Emily, even though she's a little bit younger than the age group that Sarah meets with. But what an eye-opening conversation. She read through the blog post, she fact-checked it, she reviewed it, she approved it, which was great. But it's all about our show is all about reducing the stigma around mental health. And what I'll say that I tell people is that I never would have told anyone outside my therapist and family that I suffered from anxiety and occasional depression. I never would have told anyone I see a therapist before doing the show, and it's given me, a lot of confidence to say that on air and in public. And I do want to say, Suri, that uh, just for folks watching, because some of you, if you're on the email list, I did share over the last few weeks, sometimes when I had a difficult week, that I was suffering from anxiety or depression, and the tremendous support that I got from our read along family, from our community that we built up. I would never have experienced that if I hadn't, put that out there. So I want to thank you for the community that you've built up, and all the support you've given me personally for this show. It means a lot, and look forward to having people join us along the way. Liz, I'm going to follow up with you online with some of the comments you made earlier. She said, Sri, if you didn't see
Yeah, I saw that.
Liz
Very nice. Yeah,
made a
she's
great
very.
comment. It's so important. And yes, and a long history of depression in her family. It goes hand in hand with people with physical disabilities, especially when she was first diagnosed as legally blind. So it's a very important issue, and I look forward to talking more about it as we go. Thank you, Sri.
Thank you, Neil. So with that, we're going to bring Anna back, and Anna is going to tell us a little bit more about her work and the film, and then we'll wrap up and get back to our Sundays.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Anna.
Go ahead, Anna. So
yeah,
some final thoughts.
yeah. Final thoughts. Yeah, I hope everyone checks out Wheelchair Money. You know, like Street said, you could Google it. You could just go on YouTube and find it pretty easily. And I think, you know, the best way to support is to watch it, comment, you know, keep up with what we're doing with Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. The organization does workshops throughout the year if there's anyone in the media industry that wants to get involved. And I would say if you are either a person with a disability that wants to get involved or a filmmaking professional that wants to get involved, you know, feel free to look me up on social media. Feel free to reach out to Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge because we could use all of you in helping get more of that narrative out there.
Excellent. And you can find her on all the socials. And so please check her out. Here are some comments that have come in. Patty says, thank you, Anna, and the entire New York Times Read-Along production team. Inspiring show. The great Mary C. Curtis, who's been a guest on the show, columnist, writer. You are so right about all of us eventually needing some accommodations. My nephew is autistic, and his dad, my brother, and a semi-retired judge, works on issues of access and to transportation and how law enforcement interacts with folks with disabilities. And thank you very much, Mary, for that. In regards to your nephew and your brother, and Dr. Tachi, who has a great show on Instagram, please check her out. This show makes my Sundays. And Neil, you wanted to read some of our Instagram comments.
Yeah.
We can't show them on the screen, but go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I want to note earlier, Wayne Camadoy, the art director for the New York Times, was watching the top of the show as he was driving out with family. And so he commented, talk about the evolution of the front page. On your account, Sri, RW Bombay, I'm not sure on Instagram if you know who that is. Greetings from Copenhagen.
Yes,
Dear
Roy
Sri.
Wadia. Roy
Wadia. And he said, it's been ages since I caught your New York Times readout, Sri. Great to see you going strong. And best, Roy. I do also, Kimberly is watching on both Facebook and Instagram, and I wanted to share what she wrote. This is her first time watching, and she thought we were doing an excellent job producing the show and in the conversation and hosting it. And this is my first time tuning in, and you guys have won me over as a fan. She is going to send me an email to get on our mailing list. So I encourage everyone to do that if you can. Send me an email, neil@digimentors.group, neil@digimentors.group, and we'll put you on the mailing list. This morning, we sent out an urgent alert at about 8 a.m. when we knew Tom would be joining us to let people know. So usually it's about one email a week, but occasionally we'll do two if it's warranted. And Sri is holding up the front page again to talk about the shooting.
When you go back to the top of the show, you'll see how the New York Times evolved in real time yesterday with the print editor of the New York Times. Dr. Tachi, thank you for this beautiful comment. The show makes my Sundays. And Walter Greason, such an important conversation this morning. Thank you for being the best streaming news program every Sunday. Good morning from St. Paul, Minnesota. Incredible comment from such an influential and learned scholar and expert. Thank you very much, Professor Greason. And to everyone, thank you for watching. Anna, shout out to you. Truly appreciate you. What are you going to do today now?
Well, actually, I am going to go to the Disability Unite Festival in Central Park. So if anyone's in New York City and looking for something to do, it starts at 12 p.m. So hopefully.
Which part of Central Park? Where do we find you?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, I forgot how to pronounce this, but the band shell.
All right, great.
So like 72nd towards the east side.
Yeah, excellent. Near the band shell. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you all. We'll see you next Sunday. We're going to talk about media addiction with Julie Scelfo of Mothers Against Media Addiction. Mama. Just like she's doing the work that MAD did for so many years. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, really changed America. So we're really grateful to her. And to you, Anna, thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, thank you to both of you.
Look what Doug says, getting up at 5:30, worth waking up early in California. And we appreciate that.
Diana Apfelbarker, if I'm pronouncing it right, watching on our Digimentors Instagram, says, Sri and Neil, you're the best in the business.
Wow.
You have to work that in as well.
Yeah,
Some great comments.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
right.
folks.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
Thank you.